writing letters to Franklin Delano Roosevelt, telling him what a lousy job he was doing running our country. Letters, by the way, he never replied to. But it was over. I was finished. I was going home. And that's how my friend Ebby T., some of you might know him, that's how Ebby found me. A couple of weeks later, got a call. One morning, Lois was at work. I was half into a drunk and picked up the phone and said, "Hey, Bill, it's Ebby. Can I come over and talk to you?" And my heart soared. I hated to drink alone. Here was my old drinking chum, my old school pal. Got to come over and spend an afternoon. Oh, I was delighted. I just said, "Ebby, please come over. I'm delighted." He said, "I'll be right over. Relax." He hung up the phone, and then I did something which I consider to be fairly heroic for a man of my nature. I dug out of hiding the one little pint of gin that I kept for emergencies. I kept it behind the toilet in the downstairs bathroom. I brought that into the kitchen, and I made a punch out of some pineapple juice that I scoured out of the cupboards. Ebby couldn't drink that stuff straight. And while I'm making the punch, I recalled, and from my memory, a story my wife or friends of ours had told me about Ebby. I hadn't seen him in several months, but it appeared that he had been in a motor accident up in Albany, where he was from. Seems he had driven his car into somebody's kitchen. Let me get this right. He'd driven his car into somebody's kitchen. He rolled down the window of the wreck, and he said to a woman, I think she was doing the dishes at the sink, he said, "Hey, lady, how about a cup of coffee?" I think she called the cops instead. I've got to ask him about that. I must remember to ask him, because that was big even for Ebby. I wonder how he got out of that jam. Without long to wait, the knock came to the door. And I went and I opened it up, and there was my pal. But right away, I knew he had changed. What it was, I'm not sure. Well, he was clean. I mean, that was apparent. I mean, when I mean clean, he was clean-shaven. His eyes were clear. His hat had been blocked, suit sponged and pressed, and his shoes were shined. Now, there were enough mirrors in that house that I was aware of my costume for the period. I used to go around with a collarless shirt, some baggy trousers, house slippers that were size and a half too big so I couldn't walk in them. I had to shuffle wherever I went, or else I'd walk out of them. 3 or 4 day growth of beard. I didn't bathe because I wasn't going anywhere. That's how I looked. Well, we shared some pleasantries in the parlor, and finally I said, "Ebby, let's go back into the kitchen where it's nice and warm and where the booze was on the table." And he followed me. We got back into the kitchen and sat down, him opposite me, and again we did some reminiscing. We're both eyeing the booze, you know. Finally, I couldn't have enough of it. I mean, I was getting a little thirsty. I said, "Ebby, how about a little drink?" And he put his hand on mine. He said, "No, Bill. No, thank you." "Are you on the water wagon?" He said, "No, I'm just not drinking today." I had never seen him turn down a drink. I said, "What's gotten into you?" He said, "Bill, I guess you could say I got religion." Oh my God, I said. That's the change. That's what I saw the difference. My friend is a religious nut. I've let a fanatic in my house. That's the change. I'm in for it. Oh my. Then I realized, wait a minute. That's not a bad deal because he didn't bring a jug with him. That meant this was all mine. I didn't have to share it. So I poured myself a drink and I threw it down, smacked my lips, and I said, "Okay, pal, what kind of religion have you got?" They said, "Bill, I guess you could say I got the religion of common sense." I struggled a bit. I'd never heard of Our Lady of the Common Sense. I said, "What do you mean, common sense?" He said, "Bill, I don't know if you realize how much trouble I've been having with booze." I did my best acting. I said, "You, Ebby?" Why, I had no idea. I knew he was a drunk. And as soon as I said that, I also realized now I can't ask him about Albany. Shucks. I said, "I didn't know you were having any problem with booze." "Oh, yeah, Bill." He says, "I was in bad shape. I mean, why, just a couple of months ago, I was up in the judge's chambers up home, and they were getting ready to lock me up and throw the key away. I mean, I was finished. I pulled one stunt too many. My family was fed up. But at that hearing," he said, "friends came, and they asked the judge if they could take care of me they could get me sober. They're members of these Oxford groups. Are you aware of them, Bill? And I was vaguely familiar. Every once in a while I would read about these, usually swells, big shots over in Park Avenue that were jerking people to Jesus under the name of the Oxford groups. I said, yeah, I know all about them. He said, well, I didn't know anything about him. He said, but I've been with him now for several months and I haven't had a drink, nor have I had a desire for a drink. I mean, I've taken certain ideas peculiar to those people and I've put it to work on my drinking problem, and it seems to be doing the trick. Well, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. I said, what are those ideas, Ed? He said, well, number one, Bill, I said, I had to get honest with myself for the first time in my life and take a look at what booze has been doing to me. I had no argument with that. I mean, the unexamined life is not worth living. I've often believed that. He said, Bill, then I had to talk over that life with another person in strict confidence, but I had to share that part of my life with somebody else. Confession's good for the soul. I had no argument with that. He said, then Bill, he said, I had to become willing to make restitution for the harm that I've done, to pay back what I owe to the people that I owe it to make amends wherever possible. I tried my best to recall if he owed me any money. It would be a good time to remind him, but he didn't, so I let that go by. He said, then Bill, he said, I had to become willing to help people like myself. And when I heard that you were over here having a bad spot with the booze, I asked my pals if I can come over and talk to you, and that's why I'm here. I hope I didn't offend you. And I said, well, you have. How dare you talk about me as if I'm some sort of problem? I know I'm out of work, but we're in a depression. But I'm not having any trouble with alcohol. I was just sober for 2 months. I can stop anytime I want. I know I'm going to get work. Eventually this thing's going to end. We're going to get back on Wall Street. But I don't like you people talking about me. He said, well, Bill, I didn't come here to offend you. I said, well, you have. Get that straight. You have offended me. He said, now let me finish, because I've got one other thing to talk to you about, and I know that's really going to jar you. Knowing you. And I said, well, what is it? He said, in order to do those 4 things I just mentioned, I had to come up with a power that was greater than myself, who I choose to call God. I had to ask God for help. That was the God word, the one that I was waiting for. I said, okay, pal, take that God and get out of my house. Get out. He'd mentioned the God word. He didn't argue. He got up and he left. Just the notion of somebody coming into my house talking about some personal God that's going to get you out of some of the problems that life has to offer, that's a waste of a human being. Total waste. I'm an engineer by education. I believe in the natural order of things, perhaps even some supreme consciousness. But the concept of a personal God that you can rely on to get you out of some of life's ordeals, baloney. I went back to drinking. So much for a pleasant afternoon. And drink I did for the next couple of days. But a funny thing happened. I developed another obsession. And this time, it wasn't more booze, it was Ebby. I became obsessed with my friend and the fact that he was clean and sober. And I was what I was. And the obsession grew and it grew and it grew until finally, that overwhelming ego, I realized that if one of us is going to get sober, oh, by God, it should have been me first. I should have been first. I should be carrying the message to him, not the other way around. This was intolerable. And then about that same time, I began to realize, as bad as I was, one other aspect of Ebby's call. Say I had cancer, and he showed up at my door and said, Bill, I've got some great physician in the sky that can cure your cancer. Well, by God, I would have followed him out of that house on my knees. I don't care what you would have called it. And here I had a disease, and I knew it, as deadly as cancer, and I was doing absolutely nothing about it. And finally, that didn't make sense. As bad as I was, that didn't make sense. And that's when I knew that I should at least check this organization out. My background on Wall Street is as a field investigator. I think they refer to themselves today as security analysts. I'll investigate the Oxford group, take what I want, leave what I don't want, and I'll make it work for me, and I'll become more sober than Ebby. By God, that's what I'll do. And when Lois